Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm Blair Lee, and I am the host of this Facebook Live. I'm really excited to have all of you here. This Facebook Live, we're going to focus on my new book that's coming out, Real Science Odyssey Biology 1, and I'm really excited at the thought of having kids learn the science that is in this book. It was a really um, it's one of my favorite books I've ever written. Shh, don't tell all the other books. I'll begin with a few slides that cover questions you might have. If there's something you want to know that I don't cover, please just ask. I'm here to answer your questions. Charlene and Nicole are on the back end relaying your questions to me, and I will get to those. But first, I'm going to go through the slides. The reason is I get distracted if I start answering questions in the middle of slides. And trust me, I'm going to get through the material much better, much more succinctly if I'm not distracted. So I'm going to stop my camera, I think. Oh, no. There we go. Yeah. Okay. I love this cover. I had nothing to do with the design of it, but when they sent this cover to me to see what I thought, it was my favorite cover of any of my books. That's because it highlights one of the most important understandings in all of science, and that is the connectedness and divergence of life. When I was a student and the first time I learned about evolutionary theory, it was a huge aha moment for me. And so I am hoping that the same thing happens for your children when they learn about it. So Real Science Odyssey Biology 1 was developed around biology's unifying theme, which is evolution. As I began to write the course and plan it out, I realized the manifestation of evolution could be distilled down to three words: similar but different. That's the catchphrase I used as I wrote the course. The goal is to provide explanations for similarities that connect all life and show how all organisms are related, leading to shared traits and characteristics, while teaching how the process of evolution causes differences to accrue between groups of organisms and within them. So, one question we've been getting a lot about is the overall structure of the course. There are 6 units that follow a similar structure to Real Science Odyssey Biology 2. In Unit 1, learners are introduced to a funny, feisty tardigrade named Bear. If you're familiar with Astronomy 1, you know that course also has a narrator. Well, a team in that case. There's 2 space dust bunnies in it. Using narrators like this is a teaching device. It keeps kids engaged and actively listening. This helps when introducing more complicated topics. It doesn't bring the level of science down, it actually brings students' level of understanding up by making the science seem accessible. When Bear jokes about the science or different aspects of it, students are engaged, and those are hooks that keep them learning. Really, the National Science Teachers Association has spent a lot of time looking at this, and they have written several articles about how it actually enhances students' learning to have a funny, silly narrator in the course. Because feeling like something is within your reach to learn is an important part of learning it. Unit 1 is also where the characteristics used to define life are introduced. These are easy to understand and they're important. The course is comprehensive, where concepts are built one upon the other. This concept that is covered in Chapter 2 of Unit 1 is the subject of the chapters in Unit 3. Unit 2 covers cell theory and basic genetics for all non-viral organisms, because there are 2 things that all non-viral organisms share: cells, and in the case of even viruses, genetic material. The genetics is basic, covering vocabulary, independent assortment. This is taught using 2 colors of sprinkles. If you're not sure what I'm talking about when I throw out some of these science terms, I promise you will be after you've done these labs with your child. And in this lab, students look at shared trait by relating that to family groups. As mentioned already in Unit 3, students come back to the characteristics shared by groups of organisms. As an example, the title of Chapter 6 is Organisms Grow. In addition to discussing the growth of humans, the chapter covers how other organisms grow. In this chapter, students will learn that unicellular organisms like amoebas grow by growing their one cell. They will also learn how a eutelic organism, you're probably thinking, what? This is one that has the same number of cells as a baby as they do as an adult. It turns out that most tardigrade species are eutelic. And a eutelic organism, so the baby might have 44,000 cells and the grown up still has 44,000 cells. And so they also grow by having the size of their cells grow. In this chapter, students are introduced to the concept of cell differentiation and how plants grow. And that it includes a lab where students set up the initial model of me, where they compare their growth to that of seedlings and include an investigation into the growth of frogs, an organism that goes through metamorphosis. Trust me, this all comes together to help students organize their understanding of life in a way that is conceptual and centers around core principles that even the youngest learners are likely to have some familiarity with. And then Unit 4 introduces the important vocabulary and concepts that form the basis of evolutionary theory. Now, this unit is going to use concepts that have been taught already in Units 1, 2, and 3. This unit starts with an activity where a learner and at least one other person draw a dog without looking at each other's drawings. This allows for an introduction discussing different traits because it's very unlikely that two people would draw the same dog if they didn't peek at each other's drawings. This is just one example of the scaffolding of concepts and vocabulary that happens in a practical way to meet learners where they are at this introductory level. Unit 5 covers introductory concepts of ecology. Students learn about the interdependence of organisms in ecosystems, food webs, biomes, and environmental issues. As a note, there are no live animal labs in this course. There's a real problem with invasive species in many ecosystems in the real world. Without knowing where someone lives, I don't know what species would be appropriate for them to work with. So I made the decision not to include any in this course. There are, however, plenty of what I call field research labs where students spend time outside in their environment. You can see one of these in the Try It Before You Buy It sample that was released yesterday, or I should tell the date, on the 26th of July. For what kids do when they do field research, it kind of sounds technical, but they go out and they make a bunch of observations. These are great ways for learners to connect what they're learning using Bio 1 with the ecosystem where they live. And for me, that's really important. That sort of connection to what's around them is very important for learning at this age and stage. The labs in the environmental science chapter all focus on something kids can do to help their environment where they live. And then finally, Unit 6, evolutionary history, shared traits, extinction, endosymbiotic theory. Oh, I love this model. This is the unit where students begin building their evolutionary tree model. I am so excited, seriously, to have written a book that has this model as a part of it. The illustrators did a great job helping me figure out how to put something together that shows the relatedness and divergence of life. I have so many iterations of this, and this definitely turned out to be the one that made the most sense. The tree begins at the beginning where life first evolved. Then it goes to the evolution of bacteria and archaea, the cells, plants, fungi, and animals. Each chapter in this unit has tree building. It also has a lab where learners learn more about a characteristics that's unique to the group represented on a branch. For example, kids will learn why birds are dinosaurs, but lizards aren't. And they will learn about the collection of characteristics that humans have in the last lab of the course titled, What Makes Me Human? If you want to see, I've got a link in the Real Science Odyssey Facebook group, and I think on the Pandia page to a magazine article that has to a magazine issue that has that lab in it, the What Makes Me Human, so you can see what that might look like. And then this is just one of the 3 scientific models built over a series of chapters. There's plenty of labs and activities that are not done primarily on paper. However, these 3 models where students build their own materials that focus on important concepts is a powerful learning tool that makes mental pictures in your students' mind that they can build upon in later science classes. Now, this model was one I made of one of my grandsons. I made it with his help. The personalization of these models, for example, you see my picture in the model of me, and you see this model of my that my grandson made. It's to scale to exactly his size. The personalization of these models is not accidental. Studies show that especially for younger students in the elementary grades, when there is a personal connection to the subject matter, students are more invested in learning. And of course, you can think of something that you feel connected to at your age, and you know that you're more likely to learn those concepts. This leads to it being more likely that they will have a mastery level of the information, concepts, and practices and procedures involved in the activities and the factual information that's being presented. As I have already stated, Real Science Odyssey focuses on the important concepts and builds understanding around these. It is also comprehensive and has been carefully crafted to build in complexity and understanding with intentional scaffolding of skills and concepts. This was done by me, the content editors, and the reviewers. It is important that a science course does not just focus on the factual information. There are important science practices, such as developing the skill of asking scientific questions, something that is encouraged in the course, and procedures. An example of this is the scientific method. The scientific method is a systematic way of conducting experiments and investigations to understand the natural world and solve scientific problems. The scientific method is an important teaching tool that significantly improves kids' critical thinking skills. I think that a lot of science courses these days have sort of gotten away from the scientific method at the same time that critical thinking skills are taking a real nosedive. So I really advocate for people to use science courses that incorporate the scientific method as it's a really natural way to teach the basic parts of critical thinking. The scientific method is one of the reasons the scientific method is so good at teaching critical thinking. It provides a structured framework for critical thinking and inquiry that's easy for kids to understand. As students apply this method in their scientific investigations, they cultivate essential skills that extend beyond science and contribute to their overall intellectual development. These skills include logical reasoning, data interpretation, skepticism, like, hey, where'd that come from? Where did that information come from? What do I have to support it? How strong are the supporting details? Attention to detail and effective communication. All of these are valuable for success in various academic disciplines, including science, and in real world scenarios. Teaching scientific modeling equips students with valuable skills and tools to approach scientific challenges. By using simplified versions that make it easier to focus on grade appropriate skills, scientific modeling helps learners be more scientifically literate as they form connections and pictures of concepts. I always write science courses that incorporate the four primary learning modalities: reading, writing, auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. Most people are strongest in one or two of these learning modalities. They find material easier to access when it presents materials within the scope of these modalities where they're strongest. However, there's a benefit to students doing some work using modalities that they're not as strong in. All Real Science Odyssey courses incorporate all four primary learning modalities. This benefits students' science learning at the same time it has a holistic benefit of strengthening those skills where students might need more work to become stronger in. And then metacognition. Sometimes I see people online who don't like it when they're using a course that asks questions that students know the answer to, hopefully. If your students knows the answer to a question that's being asked and they can unpack that information and share it, you should be celebrating that, and so should your students. They should know that, wow, that means that their metacognitive skills are at a higher level. That means that your learner is able to retrieve retained information and apply it in the midst of learning. I have taught college level science courses, and I can tell you that there are plenty of adults that struggle with that skill. So that is something that you will see in the Real Science Odyssey courses. Now stop sharing. Okay. Now I need to get back. Did I stop sharing? I'm I count on the people helping me to get the technology right. So, do we have any questions? Oh, I'm supposed to flip this over. Okay. Can Bio 1 and Bio 2 be used at the same time within a family with different ages? They were written. We heard from so many people that they wanted an elementary level biology course that they could use with Biology 2, that we intentionally wrote Bio 1 so that it could easily be used with Bio 2. Now, of course, there's going to be some concepts that are um, different at a different level, or that aren't covered quite as extensively, or maybe they're covered more extensively. But yeah, we were very thoughtful when we wrote the two courses that could be used together. How is Bio 1 different from Life, and how to choose between the two? Download the two samples. That is what I would tell you. Download the sample for Life 1 and the sample for Bio 1. That is gonna give you the best. So if you've got an older student, they're most likely ready for Bio 1. But if you're right on that cutoff, or you've got an advanced first grader, or you have a second or third grader that hasn't had science before, Life 1 is a gentle entry into science. It's really a nature study. Um, as with Bio 1, it's let's go out and look at so science. The discipline of science explains how the natural and physical world works, and for younger learners, the if they can touch, they're going to learn more effectively if they can touch and see what they're learning about, so that it's not as abstract. And so Life does a really good job with that. We also worked on that with Biology 1. Um, one of the differences, if you're right on the if you're just trying to decide, Biology 1 does not have any live, as I mentioned, there are no live animal labs in it. That is something some people uh, and some people end up not doing the live animal labs, so that might make Bio 1 a better choice over Life. Um, yeah, but I would just look at the two samples. You're going to have a much better idea. The vocabulary in Biology 1 is less casual. Not that the language is less casual, but we tend to use more specific science vocabulary often. And Bio 1 covers evolution as a core thematic element of the course. Life does not. Well, this is going to be very short Facebook Live if those are my only two questions. Okay. We don't have any other questions? Okay. Well, oh, can you talk more about the role of evolution in Biology 1, I'm going to guess. Okay, so evolution. So it's really interesting to me. Evolution is any any scientist and biologist who has background in evolution will tell you that evolutionary theory, and most other biologists will tell you that evolutionary theory forms the foundation of biology. And as I thought about that, as I was working on this course, I thought that if that's the case, this should be um, weaving this as a central part of Biology 1 was something that I should be able to do. Now, you will have heard from some people that they don't include evolution until um, uh, some non-secular science will tell you that the reason they don't include evolution is because it's too complicated for kids to learn. I have put that to rest. There is no reason that kids cannot understand evolutionary biology. Now, I'm no longer teaching live classes, but I spent 2.5 years teaching live classes, and I have taught evolutionary biology to 6 and 7 year olds, and they understood what I was talking about. I asked scaffolded questions, and I could tell that they were understanding what I was talking about. It's about relatedness. Now, the one part that gets a little complicated, you have to bring in genetics. So when it came to bringing in genetics, I was have kids color a chromosome, but I'm pretty casual about it. Okay, independent assortment. Well, if you have a bowl with 2 colors of sprinkles in it, and you close your eyes picking out sprinkles, and each color sprinkle came from a different biological parent, that's a dependent assortment. And so, and that lab was actually written for a friend of mine who wrote to me or picked up the phone and called me one day and said, I'm getting asked questions about how different traits come from mom and dad. Can you help me with that? The science explanation. And that the sprinkle lab was born many years before Bio 1 was written. So I bring it down to make it understandable. The more complicated it is, the more likely it is to have been tested on real kids. I did a lot of testing and sending this to people with young kids. So evolution comes in. I introduce the important concepts early. The first thing I do is I introduce all organisms share these traits. Oh, and by the way, all organisms, there's other traits. You get to unit 2, there's something else all organisms share. Those are non-viral. They're made of cells. Okay, and then kids and then we talk about the things that cells have. And then they build a model of a plant cell and an animal cell. It's one of the few labs that is redundant to life. And you'll also find that lab in Bio 1. And then only this time they build an edible one. And then I get to the next chapter in Unit 2, and it's organisms also share genetic material. All viruses, by the way, have genetic material. Some have a type of genetic material called RNA and don't have DNA, but all viruses also have genetic material. I am leading kids to when you start talking about the traits that organisms share, that's evolutionary theory. That's a foundation. When you hear scientists say evolution is foundational to biology, anytime you are talking about shared traits and characteristics, shared biochemical processes, you are talking about or shared molecules used in that organism's cell membrane versus this organism. So when there's what is it? It's 347. I might have it. It's 340 something gene segments that every single organism on Earth, species of organism on Earth, share. That's profound. Now, I don't get into this really, but then I have them do the early evolution with the tree. So evolutionary theory, when you look at things that are shared, that is evolutionary theory, even if it's not stated as evolutionary theory. And then it's really important to talk about the differences. And if you're going to talk about the differences, you have to have some genetics. And I like to cover the differences within a species because that's easy for kids to see how they're different from how they might look different from the people around them. 6-year-olds don't, 8-year-olds don't have a problem with that concept. They're familiar with it. And then we build that same indifference. So then you get to Unit 3, and Unit 3, I love the chapter titles in Unit 3. I love them. Unit 3 does not, so it doesn't focus on the circulatory system or the respiratory system. It says all organisms have circulation. Well, what does that mean? Because if that's a shared characteristic, what does it mean for plants? Plants don't have a heart. What does that mean for a tardigrade? What does that mean for an amoeba? if they all have circulation. And so I actually, but it's a book for elementary level students, but if you really think about some of the conceptual things that are in Biology 1, I'm really proud of it. I feel that there's some profound science concepts that are presented in this course that are going to prepare any child using it for some very it's a wonderful scaffolding course for young people to the next level of science. Okay, I flipped my phone over again because I went long on that. Danielle, I'm going to tell you the same thing. Download them both. Now, the one issue for the 13-year-old is not every 13-year-old likes a narrator. Bear is funny. Bear is feisty. Bear is some young people might feel, some 13-year-olds might find Bear a little too young, but maybe not. If you feel Bio 2 may be too advanced, I really encourage you, download the 2, try before you buy it. Just wondering, could Bio 1 be, yes, Bio 1 could easily be built up for an older student. So how would you do that? Okay, well, I've mentioned non-viral organisms a couple times. You add in some videos. You add in the viruses have genetic material, or if you feel a certain lesson is a little young, go and look at how it's presented in Bio 2. You could easily, if you're, for example, learning about independent assortment, which is a more complicated chapter, so I shouldn't probably go there, or the anatomy and physiology section, you could easily, so the difference between Bio 2 and Bio 1 with that Unit 3, Bio 1 takes a holistic look, where I incorporate the anatomy and physiology of humans into that of other organisms. Biology 2 focuses at a higher level on the anatomy and physiology of young people. And I think that's actually important. I mean, if I were teaching a 13-year-old, I would absolutely do the reproductive system, for example. They're going through puberty. You want to make sure when you do the endocrine system and you do the reproductive system that is age, that's on their level. So yeah, you might look at melding the 2. And for if you ever have any specific questions, if you decided to cobble something together kind of like that, you can tag me in the Real Science Odyssey Facebook group, and I am more than happy to come in there and answer any and all questions. And I have done all the labs. I'm more than happy to troubleshoot something if you're struggling with any thing. Will there be video links to support lessons in Biology 1? Not that now, if you're familiar with Heard a course and I made a bunch of videos. I did not make any videos that go with this, but we already have the video links. Bio 1 has, so Pandia, I don't know exactly how it functions. So if one of the people, Charlene does or Nicole does, but I don't know how it functions. Oh, I was just sent a message. I can tell them that they're adding more events like we're adding more events like this to the Facebook Live, but the video links to support lessons in Bio 1. So there is a section for the science course of Bio 1 somewhere on the Pandia website that has video links, reading book suggestions. We went through all of those. We made sure all of those worked as I think as recently as a month ago. And there's also, so as I made these models, I was like, wow, the ones in the book you might have to print a little larger or a little smaller. And so they have taken things like the muscles and the bones. Those templates are going to be available to all of you, to any users of the course, so that you can play around and get them just right size for your child using the settings on your printer, which is like you go in and you print it on custom at 125% or 110%, or it was really easy. And I am not a technological whiz by any means. And I was able to do it. Um, yes, so we are going to, yeah, I'm going to be writing future blog posts. It's on my calendar. I wrote one went live this week. It really goes into the details of Bio 1. I already covered in the slides. So if you sat through the slides, you probably don't necessarily need that. But I'm going to go into some more general science topics, things like how you can use how science as a gateway to teaching critical thinking skills. I really feel strongly. It's just so easy. It's like, hey, your hypothesis. What's your hypothesis? You're making a prediction. Is this a guess, or is this something that you have some information about? You know, I would love it if we could teach the general public to do more of that. Some of these things that you think, how did people even come to this to think this is this conclusion? They started with a faulty hypothesis that didn't have a lot of support, strong factual support behind it. And so you can really, and then, okay, so we have a hypothesis, but then how do we design a test for this hypothesis? Because the hypothesis isn't the conclusion. And so walking students through that intentional scaffolded critical thinking, as happens with the scientific method, really teaches is a wonderful foundational set of skills as you teach critical thinking. We're going to do that. We're going to do, I think I've got an article planned about the scientific method, and I've got a talk in an article about ages and stages in science learning. So yeah, those are some things that we have planned for the future. Do I have any more questions? Um, well, I'm here. Is anybody, if we're done with questions about Bio 1, and you're curious and you're here, go check it out. It's actually, as you can tell, I am a fan of the course. I had, so at Pandia, there's a whole team of us that put this together. And so the team helped this be from the content editors to the reviewers, really helped me make this, made my dream for this course a reality. If anybody's got any other more general questions as you're trying to figure out what science course you want to buy in August, the August sale, don't forget, feel free to ask those. Otherwise, do you have any more questions, Charlene? Okay. I Do I have a recommended spider for Biology 1? I don't exactly know how to answer this. So we don't use any live animal labs. I don't see one. I'm not sure what the question is referencing. Okay. Spine. Do I have a recommended spine for Biology 1? Um, I was going to tell you that it depends on where you live. Let's go to spider for a minute. It really depends on where you live. If you want to spend some time looking at spiders, we have a lot of wolf spiders where I live, and they're very cool. Do I have a recommended spine to go along with Biology 1? No, I'm going to recommend that you put together. So, yes, actually, do I have a recommended spine? My recommended spines are. I- Recommended extra purchases to go along with Biology 1. I'm going to recommend that you purchase some field guides. I feel strongly that I don't think live animal sort of that sort of field research in biology is bad. I think kids should be learning about what's in their environment. And so I think that a biology class should always have a field guide. But I know that's not exactly what you're asking. I am going to have to get back to you on that. And the reason is I'm going to have to look to find a spine that for this age and stage, for this grade level, that incorporates evolutionary theory, that makes the connections with evolutionary theory. So if you're looking for one, I'm going to recommend that you look at how they use evolution to connect the different pieces that are the different concepts that are being taught. That is not something that is always done for this grade level. Oh, the one other thing I want to tell people, so I've I made certain Biology 1 does incorporate all of the next gen science standards for K through 5 for life science. For those of you who are, and all of for those of you who follow those, I can say bye. And now we're going to go to the outro video. And um, it is my goal in science, just before we go to the outro, to help. Science is a really important subject. Every single day, you make, even if you don't think about it, you make decisions that involve science. Science is how the natural and physical world works. And many of those decisions are made in around topics in biology. So life science is a really important course. This isn't a course that is just about evolution. This course has all of the core and fundamental concepts that your child, that will benefit them in learning biology in middle school and high school. With this scaffolded approach to science learning, it provides hooks in their brain like Velcro, and it really will allow them to synthesize understandings as they're out in the natural and physical world and in learning science at later ages and stages. I'm going to take that as my close, and then we're going to go to the outro video.